Perfect. Thank you very much, Nizik. And welcome back for everybody that are joining us, that are here. And well, getting on with this course, DP 203 Data Engineering with Microsoft Azure. You have seen that it's very, very complex and big topic regarding all the modules we have overviewed the last 3 days. Many things to consider, and it's interesting also. I mean, we are learning and learning every day new things, even with the tools we used to use. New things sometimes appears the way we can use it, and it's always good to actually talk with people, getting on those kind of courses where sometimes nonetheless we know, sometimes we know the topic already, but some details can catch our attention and well get us think about the problem in a different way so we can give a different solution, right? And actually, before starting and getting into the two next modules, I'd like to ask you guys a little ice break question. And always, as I said, I'm keen to know what people thinks, what people likes, etc. So the question of today, and I'm just gonna tell it verbally. I'm not gonna write it down on the slides here, but what is, or maybe what are, if you have like couples, tools, or let's say languages for those who are coding? What are the tools in your IT environment that you like to use, or you liked to use? Something that catched your attention, something that you liked, and something that you still use and still like. So I like to see your thought and your preferences. Can obviously write it down in chat. I'm gonna have a look on the answers. As for me, I used to code well, and not so much right now. But yes, I was always fond of computing science, right, from my childhood. And in my university, at that time, I used to program, to code a lot with. Actually, I started with the C, not even C++, but C, and then C++, and then Java. I really enjoyed Java. And currently, as I was getting to the data analysis field and data engineering, I get into the Python. And Python is, for me, quite impressive. I see things and comparing to those languages I used to learn, and I say, okay, that's quite a lot simpler. But at the same time, sometimes compared, for instance, to Java or C++, I have this sensation of you don't have this kind of control I used to have. For instance, when you make your loop, right? For those who know a bit, the way you make loops in Python, I was like, wow, that's so easy when you have to go through the collection, and the way you put the syntaxes compared to Java or C++. I was like, okay, nice, but I don't have this kind of control I like to have anyway. Um, yeah, so please tell me what are your thoughts about your program languages, the tools, etc. Power BI is something I used to also use when I want to get the reports. Um, yeah, basically to visualize data. Power BI is very something very powerful, I think, and I used to I enjoy to use Power BI. And I see some answers here. Adam says Python, Chandu, Python. Good. Yeah, this is a very common language today. as actually is this format of JSON. At my time, when I started to be in the computing science field, XML was the default, let's say, the default format, right, for getting the data. So yeah, it depends of maybe I guess the time, right, the year, the time of the year, yeah. All right. And in the meantime, well, I see here people joining us. Welcome, 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 Anna Vargas. Welcome, Vincent, Hing, Amira, Heiki, Husseini, OC, Uzair, Manny. Welcome. Good morning, good evening, or good day. Stepan, Ramesh, Shweta, Angela, Marcos, Daniela, Raghuveer, Arun, Pierre, see Christoph, Stanislav, welcome guys, welcome. And well, hopefully today will be a day where you will learn something about the two topics are actually again with regarding the data integration with data factory, especially here with notebooks, how to integrate data from notebooks. The next topic would be about security. So let's start with this first module. Um, we will explain here, we will learn how to use the data factory in Synapse pipeline to orchestrate large-scale data movement and using over data platform or machine learning. Um, it's gonna enable you to take advantage of the capabilities of these over platforms to manipulate data, okay? Rather than just use the building capabilities of data factory or synapse pipelines, right? Depending, because sometimes that's the way you're gonna need to work. And we're gonna include here, for instance, the copy activity, mapping data flow again, that have been covered in the previous modules. So that's something you you should actually be familiar with a bit more here. All right. So the reason that we not need to take this approach, as I said, is because sometimes you want to keep the infrastructure that you have already on play in your organization, right? And taking advantage of it, right? So yeah, you can take advantage of data factory or Synapse pipelines, um, and get the pipelines into something that is already in place. So let's go on now. And the agenda for the first module here, actually we are at the module seventh, okay, module seven, and we are more than halfway now of this course, obviously, because we are four left with this one. Okay, so lesson one, integrate data from notebooks with Azure Data Factory or Azure Synapse Pipelines. How to integrate a notebook. And again, a notebook is something very useful when you actually in the lab, I guess on the beginning of this course, you had this notebook that was imported, right? And you have seen over there the cells, how you can run instructions very easily, like putting the code, actual code, spin off a cluster, etc. So that's what a notebook does, right? Getting code executed on a cluster, for instance, in the Azure Databricks, on a cluster of Spark, but in Synapse, it could be also in a SQL pool, right? So you get your notebook and you get instructions over there. You can visualize data, etc., etc. What if you want to integrate that in a pipeline because you have put there your code and the way you want to manipulate the data. So put the notebook in the pipelines. That would be quite a good idea, right? And here you see some stages, some steps to integrate this notebook. So you should be actually familiar with the first three steps of creating a storage account, creating a Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipelines, and creating a data workflow, sorry, activity when you use, for instance, a copy activity, right? So here you use storage, you use Azure Synapse pipeline, and create this data workflow pipeline. So that was something that we have already seen and already used, right? So the third one would be the fourth one would be adding a notebook, right? A notebook activity to this pipeline. And remember, usually on pipelines or activity, you can set parameters. So that's something that you would consider also. So you can reuse, you can make your pipeline general, and getting into the dependency conditions, right? So that's the five, let's say, steps you need to consider when you're gonna have your pipeline in place. All right, so programmatically, how does it looks like when you create your Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipelines? Because in the previous module, we have seen already using it with a UI, user interface. So now is the occasion for you to see how does it look like when you use the code, okay? And this is purely for convenience, okay? Because we spend quite a bunch of time with the UI in the previous modules. So I think it's worth to point out how you can create a data flow using code and a method that it could be used to build out our ETL or ERT solution, right? By the way, I mentioning here ETL or ERT. It's worth to mention that ETL, as I explained last time, is extract, transform, transform, and load your data. Then you have ELT, which is extract, load, and transform. So you can see the only difference between the two is just between the L and T. It's another order. Here we were extracting and then transforming, whereas here we're extracting and loading straight away. So why? Why doing here the other way around with the two next activities? It's a question of how we want to overload the, for instance, the source system, right? Depends where you are making this activity of transforming. So sometimes it's convenient to, for instance, outsource or getting this activity done in the destination place, right? In the destination system. Since we don't want, remember, overload the source system. That's something important to consider when you want to apply a solution, ETL or ALT. Again, this is the same concept, but you choose where you want to overload your activity in which system. So as merely as that. So just remember, this is the same thing, but putting it in different order because of your requirement of workload data. Right, that was just a close parenthesis here. So get back here about what is about creating Azure data. factory and Synapse pipeline. The example on the screen uh, allows you actually to build a link service. Okay, so you can build here, for instance, a solution when you use, for instance, Azure CLI, command line interface, PowerShell, .NET, Python, any REST APIs, or the RM template. Okay, should explain here a bit more what's going on. For instance, you have this format, JSON format. Okay, you have here the attribute and then the value. So, for instance, here the name is AZ Data Lake 3567, 356357, etc. Type, which type of linked service you are building. Sorry, the properties is something that has a nested hierarchy. Remember, you have the possibility in this format to nest kind of hierarchy. So, for instance, property would be composed with annotations, type property, and then type property is nesting again another attributes like URL, encrypted credential. And here you are talking about like security aspects, etc., etc. So that's what the code here looks like, and it's in JSON format. Creating a notebook. Again, here, um, the advantage of compute activities is beyond what actually you can see here of the notebook. So there are many examples that include actually Azure Machine Learning, Azure Databricks, Azure HD Insight, etc. And the example on the screen is obviously here a notebook that has been created within Synapse Analytics. Okay, but it takes the Apache Spark pools. Okay, that's why we are using here PySpark language on one cell. So we are creating a data frame, and we are chaining here to method, reading and loading on this path. Okay, Azure Blob File System. That's the format of the file system here with the path to into your data lake. And you can see here we are taking all the files of Parquet format, and then we are displaying them with a limit of 10. Oops, sorry. Again, you have been working with notebooks, right, already, and it has been covered in module 3, module 4. So that's something that now should be a bit more familiar to you guys. Okay. I'd like also to recommend you, if you would like to have more regarding the notebooks and how to orchestrate data movement with the notebooks and within Data Factory, you have a Microsoft Learning Path address, which is in, let me see here. Okay, yeah, orchestrate data movement, transformation, Azure Data Factory. Okay, just put those keywords maybe on the search field in Microsoft or even in Google. If you put like Microsoft Learning Path, orchestrate data movement transformation, and you'll have more information about to create a notebook within a pipeline. So next step is here to create parameters for your notebook. Okay, so mapping data flows in Azure Data Factory and actually Azure Synapse Analytics. Well, it supports the use of parameters. Okay, so if you define parameters inside of your data flow, and you can use them, so you can use them throughout those expressions you are putting in place. The parameter values then are set by calling pipelines okay, via the execute data flow activity. And you have free option for setting the values in the data flow activity expression. So first, use the pipeline control flow expression language to set the dynamic value. Use the data flow expression language to set the dynamic value. So that's like this one. You have here the method that can be dynamic. And you can use either an expression language to set a static literal value. Okay. So yeah, you can use this capability to make your data flow general purpose and flexible. So that's why we always talked about parameters in this way. Make it flexible, reusable, parameterizing data flow. Okay. And if you are using this in conjunction with external resources, such as a notebook, you may want to parameterize values in a notebook and pass the notebook parameter value to parameter in a pipeline. In the example in the slides, we are using the UUID library. Okay, it comes with the Spark to generate a random UID. And what we want to do here is override the run ID with a parameter passed in by the pipeline. Okay, that's what is going on here. Yeah, well, that's basically it for here. Let me show you. Yeah, parameters, as you can see here, and then we're running that in a cell 8. So in that way, you're definitely making it dynamic. Okay. And so that's the next step. When you get the top 5 products overall, sorry, and on the pocket, you are making this right? Run ID plus pocket, and those are the parameters you need to pass into this method. All right. So the next step, when you put your parameters, when it is done, when you know what kind of parameters you are using, you can then here integrate your notebook into a pipeline. So very easy here in this GUI interface. Well, your GUI actually is a graphical user interface. So here you have the first step is getting in the notebook, because this is a screenshot from notebook. You have this icon, right? And that's the way where you can say, or let's say integrate the notebook in an existing pipeline, or you can get in a new pipeline, okay? And at that point, if you select, for instance, an existing pipeline, you will have this screenshot here, this window here is popping up and asking you which pipeline you would like to use, right? So you choose your pipeline, then add, and that's pretty it. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward to integrate the notebook into a pipeline. Now, you can control the execution of various components that reside within a pipeline, okay, through branching or chaining activities. Here, a simple example is, for instance, a pipeline that does a simple copy, okay, from a container in Azure Blob storage to another container in the same storage account, for instance. And if the copy activity succeeds, the pipeline, okay, sends details of the successful copy operation, such as, for instance, the amount of data written, uh, and send it, for instance, in an email by email, so you can be notified. And if the copy activity fails, the pipeline sends details of copy failure, okay, Again, in the maybe same email address that you have provided, or maybe another one. So in the screen, for instance, here's the example of the activity. It's named write user profile. And if it's success, then he will execute this notebook. And it's success because here you can see control flow in green. You could actually, again, as we have talked about yesterday, put any control flow. You can choose your control flow and have, for instance, another one that goes here in the case of a failure. What happens if, for instance, this activity fails? So you put another here control flow, and here could be, for instance, another kind of activity, right? Here's notebook, it could be actually another notebook. So that you do perform another actions, etc., right? In the case of fail, here is succeeded, failure, etc. And actually, you have other kind of control. So you have, let me try to sum up this. You have success. You have here failure, for instance. You could have another one which would be, let me put that here, okay. And it could be actually completion. And you have here skipped. Okay. So failure, success, it's quite pretty straightforward. Completion, it doesn't consider whether it's a failure or success. It's just that it is done. After it's done, just get to this one. So if I had this actually, it would create two parallel activity here because it's a success or failure. But anyway, I'm gonna do the completion. And skipped is when actually it has been skipped, as simple as that. So it goes directly to this one if this one has been skipped. Okay. Okay, good. So we are done here with this controlling notebook execution in pipeline. Um, we're talking about the notebook actually when the notebook was taking place. So again, here are some questions for you guys. Which control flow setting allows you to pass arguments while you're invoking the pipeline? Okay, so I'm gonna give you here just a couple of minutes, well, not minutes, but just a couple of seconds to think about. And you can answer in the chat actually, if you have any idea about the first answer of this question. So which control flow setting allows you to pass arguments while you're invoking the pipeline? And the answer is parameter. Yes, Ramesh. Toggle parameter. Definitely good. You were right. That's the right answer. Okay, second question. There are four dependency conditions that link control flow activities together. Success, failed, completed. What is the fourth? Well, actually, I mentioned completion. If completed, that's the same thing. Success, failed, completed, or completion. What will be the fourth one I've just mentioned previously? Sorry. Ramesh says skipped. Wouter says skipped. Maston says skipped. Okay, and the answer is skipped, definitely right. Finally, the third question, what type of parameter should you use when you have multiple pipelines where the parameters name and values are identical? So I'm going to give you again a bit of time to think about what type of parameter should you use when you have multiple pipelines. And answer is, okay, here, see, no answers yet. But it's normal because actually we haven't talked about this a lot. But yeah, you can have global parameters when you want to uh, make or reuse your whole, let's say, pipeline, uh, the whole pipelines you may have in place. So you might use actually there the global parameters. So those parameters will be applying to any pipelines you have created. And that's a good way actually to, well, save a bit of time instead of setting the same parameters on all your pipelines. You use just the global global parameters. And that's the way you will have your whole schema of pipeline reusable and actually more easy to maintain. That's it for actually this quick module. Okay, it's a very quick module here. Um, in the lab, you will have a couple of things. You will actually overview creation of notebook, okay, to query user activity, purchases that have been made in the past 12 months, all right? So you will add the notebook to the pipeline using a new notebook activity. Um, Executing the notebook after you map your data flow, and obviously that's an orchestration process. Okay, so while you configuring this, you will implement parameters to add dynamic content in the control flow, right? And how the parameters can be used. Okay, um, it's quite pretty straightforward lab and objectives because what you have seen previously with data Azure Data Factory here is just integrating a notebook, okay, being part of the data flow. And we have time here to review the question. Um, which Spark library is used to generate a random UID? And we have seen it quickly within one slide. The Spark library that is used to generate the random UID. Can I give you a bit of time? And the answer is, now I have to write it myself here. UU, well, let me put that maybe bigger, UUID. And yeah, Husseini said it at the same time. UUID, definitely. Yep, master, definitely UUID. Second question for the lab review. What color is the success dependency condition? Remember when I talked about success, failure, completion, or completed? Then the link between the two activity was in a certain color. Which color was it? Do you remember? The color of the line that was linking the two activities. So the color was, and actually I'm gonna put that here, and green. Green was the answer. So next question, question three, which tab enables you to add dynamic content? Which tab enables you to add dynamic content? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about. So the answer is the control flow activity, control flow activity. That was the one you want to go get into when you want to add some dynamic content. Okay. And finally, the fourth question, where can you view information about the pipeline execution? And the answer is this can be found in the monitor hub actually. That's where you can find this view to see the pipeline execution. Okay, monitor hub of Azure Synapse Studio. Here we go. Okay, so that's just a couple of questions to get you ready, to make you maybe prepare for the exam also. Those kind of questions can definitely be there. Um, and yeah, are good training actually. So you have learned here how to integrate data from notebooks with Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipelines. We're done with this module. I'd like to give you a quick break. Well, in this time, we can just take like maybe 10 minutes of break. So we go on to the security module. For that purpose, I will put you here a countdown. Perfect. Okay. So here we go with the little break, giggle, and a coffee, a tea, or whatever you feel to, and we'll be back. All right, people. So we're back after this quick break here, and we're going into the eighth module regarding security aspects, regarding the security requirements you might have and might consider. I'd like to mention here that this is also actually a quick module, not a lot of here contents, although a bit sharp. You need to understand carefully the concept. I guess what we could do to not actually overwhelm you the last day, which is tomorrow, with the two last modules, which are not so big, but we would have also an exam prep. I'd like to present you a couple of things to prepare you properly into the exam, a couple of questions, etc., etc. So what we could do, we have then three module left after this one. Maybe I guess we're gonna have time, and then I'm gonna present you here in this session the module 9. So we will have just two module left for tomorrow plus the exam prep. Okay, having said that, so let's get back here uh, to the concern of us of ours. Um, and this is not the first time that actually you would have heard about security in this course. We mentioned that at several other occasions, right? You actually have looked the security requirements or domain in module 4, for instance, right? When you run interactive queries, when you use synapse analytics in these serverless SQL pools. It's important to say that in this module, much of the security will be focused on data lake security, okay, as well as the authentication and the authorization options that you have at your disposal in Azure Synapse Analytics serverless SQL pools. Uh, and that's as many things in this architecture is a layer. Okay, the security is a layer, another layer to pass through, right? Um, so yeah, we're gonna be focused on the dedicated SQL pool, the serverless SQL pool, and any supporting technology that can help us here, okay, to provide this uh, tight security that we're looking for. Because remember, we are in a public cloud with Azure, so we have to be very careful about this aspect. So let's get into the agenda, which is lesson 1, secure data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics. Gonna configure and manage secrets in Azure Key Vault, and we're gonna implement compliance control for sensitive data. So definitely securing the data warehouse should make sense, right? Because this is very some some data that are sensitive, right? And the Azure ecosystem is using something called Azure Key Vault, not just for our purposes here of data engineering, but in any other, let's say, field. You will see this Azure Key Vault, which is very convenient, and we will have a word about this. Managing secrets is also very good. Implementing compliance controls in sensitive data. Well, also always about compliance. There's a big topic here also in Azure. All right. So let's get into the first lesson, secure data warehouse. And yes, as I mentioned, okay, security is a multi-layered approach. And data actually in this thing is core, right? But there are a range of technologies, processes, and actually people that can protect it. For instance, on the physical let's say, physical layer, physical security of the building, for instance, can are already considered here to protect our data centers, for instance. So every aspect is important about the security, and it is actually as strong as the weakest link that we may experience in those layers, right? If I do here a schema that, for instance, our, let's say, thing that we're trying to protect data, and we have here layers of security, right? Protecting it. So if one of those layers up, here's like a little bridge. So then, as I mentioned, um, is the secret is as strong as the weakest link. So if there's a link here, not so, I mean, if this link is weak, if there is some, let's say, holes, and then yeah, you can pass through. So there is a problem concerned here, for instance, right? So a simple example could be a concept called, for instance, tailgating the physical security layer. So it definitely involves any organization, right, to operate with policies of badged access. Like, when you go into the building and you have your badge to access any area you need to. So that's the same thing here. And all members, for instance, of staff, get the access to the building. They use the badges actually um, uh, allowed, right? So tailgating is one failure of security. Tailgating means that when an individual accesses a building without badging in, so for instance, they are like just behind the person who is accessing the part of the building, with his badge. And maybe it happened to you already when I was working previously in the corporation, and we have those badges and we had access to a certain part of the building. So sometimes because some people were behind and you just badge, and the people behind you want to also get through, so being polite, saying like, yeah, please, and you just keep the door open, right? Actually, this is tailgating, right? And well, I don't know. Obviously, it's not correct, right? According to the policy of the companies, they always say us, no, you should actually make sure the people should badge it behind you, or at least, yeah, check it that. If not, just closing the door, which may seem a bit impolite, right? So sorry, I'm gonna close the door. Well, it depends on the culture, maybe. Yeah, depending on the culture, I guess this is where people may differ about the mentality, how they act regarding this aspect. But anyway, this is like a security failure, right? So, um, yeah. And the other one, actually, here we're going to talk about identity and access, manage sensitive data, and encryption capabilities built into Azure. Okay. By default, Microsoft is encrypting data, right? Each time you have data in your Microsoft Azure ecosystem, and by default, Microsoft is required to encrypt the data. So that's something you all always have to also keep in mind regarding security. Now, here are a couple of, let's say, yeah, matters about security, right? Because you have internet protection, firewalls, DDoS protection, network security groups, couple of protection against unwanted attack. And let's try to see each of them, okay? So for instance, internet protection. Internet protection assess, yeah, the resources that are internet facing, because it's on the internet level, and only allow inbound and outbound communication where necessary. Make sure You identify all resources that are allowing inbound network traffic of any type. Okay, so this is on the level of internet when you are getting into the open internet, right? On the other way here on the other side, you have firewalls, and it provides inbound protection to your perimeter. Firewalls is about protecting, yeah, your perimeter of your, for instance, local network, right? So that's where you're actually gonna get this protection when you don't want. It would be like, let's say, I like to represent that as a wall, right? You have your, let's say, castle, I don't know, for those who are maybe not so fan about those series about medieval ages and everything, but you might have seen the castles, right? The Middle Ages castles, and you have a big wall surrounding the castle, and that's this wall would be like a firewall. So you don't want any or everybody comes into the castle. You should control that, right? So let's see if I roll like a big wall protecting your network, right? You have different choices to set a firewall, Azure firewall, you have an Azure application gateway, and storage firewall. All right, the third one is DDoS protection. What is DDoS? It's actually distributed because it's gonna be on the large scale. So distributed denial of services. So what it is denial of service? Um, in the network security area, lots of time we are actually dealing with those denial of services. You have those genuine denial of services when, for instance, you have, let's pretend, an e-commerce, right? You are selling online your products, and imagine that you have so much success, or you're getting a big promotion that many people are trying to connect to your website because they want to purchase something or they're ordering something. They're actually generating lots of traffic, inbound traffic. So the bandwidth would be overload, and at some point, your server says, "Well, stop, please, it's too much. Uh, I cannot handle all this traffic." It's like comparing to a brick and mortar commerce, yeah, yeah, commerce, or let's say a market, right? You are in your little brick and mortar shop. Sorry, shop. That was the word I was looking for. So you are there and you are making a big promotion, and imagine like a big human wave is coming into your shop, a new little shop. So definitely not being able to handle that kind of that amount of people coming into your shop and trying to get the product you are selling. And yeah, I want that. Uh, I actually makes me think about some images or video I've seen in United States of those Black Fridays, not maybe Black Fridays, but those kinds of when you have big, let's say, opening of a store and people are crazy going into. So this is that would be a denial of service, in this, let's say, a supermarket shop when the cashier is like overloaded and cannot process all the clients that coming with the products and say, I want to check out. So that's here a point, right? Too much traffic and it's distributed. So there is actually a protection against that. And actually in this case, I was talking about something that can happen because of your success. But what hackers do is that they're actually generating false traffic on purpose. so that your website on your server would not be able to provide the services that is intended to, right? To provide the web pages, the functionality of payment, etc., etc. So all of those services are going to be denied because a hacker is playing around and denying and generating a false traffic, therefore denial of service, right? And you need to then to have this DDoS protection because it is more common than we think. Here is one, for instance, solution, Azure DDoS protection service, and it protects definitely not just the modules we have seen in this course, but many other Azure applications. And yeah, scrubbing traffic, Azure Network Edge. And so that's the way here it explains how it works quite a bit at the high level. So yeah, it can impact your services availability. So you want your services always available. And the DDoS attack are here to prevent your services to be available. Finally, you have network security group. So network security groups allow you to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. Okay. So here we are inside. We are inside into your castle, right? So you're actually here filtering any traffic going there, and it can contain multiple inbound and outbound security rules. Okay, so people or let's say data that want to go out or come into your castle, you can set the rules over there. Now, time to talk about more about identity and access also. So you have authentication and authorization. Just a quick word about those two concepts. Authentication is when you want to actually identify yourself. Who are you? Right? As it says here, identity of a person. Are you the person that you're seeing connecting to the website? So there will be like a kind of control. For instance, a facial control could be a kind of authentication access control. Okay, the camera will recognize your face and says, "Yeah, this face is belongs to this person," right? You can definitely use Azure Active Directory on that purpose, cloud-based identity service. So this is quite common and very useful. Authorization. So authorization, on the other hand, is about what can I do? What are my, let's say, actions? Actions allowed. What can I do? So this is a process of establishing level of access. Yeah. What level can I access? What can I do? Am I on the top of the building and therefore access to archives of all the financial stuff? Or maybe I can have just access to the lowest part of the building where I can just check out the day to day operation data, right? So that's what authorization provides you. Are you authorized to go at the top of the building of your corporation or just at certain level here, etc.? Again, Azure Active Directory to support this capability of authorization. Some Azure Active Directory features. You have the single sign-on, you have the apps and device management, and you have identity services. So yeah, the single sign-on enables users to remember only one ID and one password, which is quite, for me, I like it. I like it having that way, but it's not so secure to having, for instance, the other method of double checks, right? Because, well, you don't always remember which password you're using or ID, and actually some people, and I'm including myself in it, are setting passwords the same password for many things, which is not so good, right? You have apps and device management, so you can manage your cloud and on-premise apps, devices, and the access to your organizational resources. And identity services, you manage business to business identity or even business to customer identity services. Um, so yeah, you may consider actually those security concerns in your context when you're considering user accounts. So it's always important to point out that um, you can actually uh, use those methods, security method, and you have something like called, for instance, the shared access key for storage accounts. So yeah, just keep in mind actually here those two methods, those two key concepts: authentication and authorization. Now, let's talk about configuring and managing secrets in Azure Key Vault. And Azure Key Vault is, again, here a nice analogy in our real world, physical real world, a vault. What is a vault? Well, if I'm not wrong, if my English is not so bad, a vault would be like you have your cube here, and then you have your, let's say, here the things to spin, for instance, right? To spin it and to open this vault, and inside the vault you have your yeah, your valuable things, right? And Azure implemented something like that, okay, to get access to those vault, and you're gonna have those keys, right, to get into it. And in the digital now world, how is it implemented? So here is, for instance, a quick, it's a screenshot how configure Azure Key Vaults, right? So in the new linked service, for instance, you're gonna have here the possibility to choose Azure Key Vault, right? And it says that Azure Key Vault protects secrets, keys, and certificates. That's what you kind of put inside the vault and use it at your convenience. And yes, as a data engineer, you're going to be concerned to access the data containing in a key vault to apply, for instance, to the linked service. Remember, linked service are the link that allows you to get into, to connect to other, let's say, modules or elements in your Azure ecosystem. So here we're gonna have, this is the AKV linked service, right? The linked service properly set here with a secret name, a secret version. So yeah, um, it's definitely a centralized, right, cloud service for storing those secrets, encryption keys, certificates, and yeah, it's a good place actually. It's a centralized place that help us to control our application secrets. We're gonna keep them in a central location. So that's the idea about the key vault. Um, you use Azure Key Vault to create multiple secure containers called vaults, right? And well, it actually reduced the chances of accidental loss, right? It's like in real life. I used to have my keys of my car keys with me and putting that in some place. If I don't put them on a central place with maybe other keys, then I may lose them. I don't remember where I put them. So as the same thing here, we can put a vault. We're gonna put all the important keys and security things over there, right? So keys are the central actor in the Azure Key Vault. Where is it here? Okay. Um, a given key in a given vault is a cryptographic asset. Okay. destined for particular use, such as asymmetric master key of Microsoft Azure RMS, or the asymmetric keys used for SQL Server TDE. And TDE means transparent data encryption. That's for the key. What about the secrets? Secrets are small, actually, in terms of space, less than 10K kilobytes of data. So they are protected by HSM generated key, okay, created with a key vault. So secrets exist to simplify the process of persisting sensitive settings that almost every application has. Storage account keys, PFX files, SQL connection strings, etc. So data encryption keys. Azure Key Vault is really a service that, well, makes you easy, the life easy, right? Um, Managing or deploying public and private, for instance, SSL, TLS certificates. The SSL, TLS certificates are the ones that you typically can use for connecting to a website in a secure manner. So those secrets are very, very good to manage those kind of things. And that's pretty it. I mean, the certificates are what we have seen. Well, what you can see here in general about, for instance, connecting to website. You need certificates, and you're gonna provide them through what we have said, the SSL, TLS. Now, how to implement compliance controls for sensitive data. For instance, here we're gonna see some SQL code about column level security. And we are saying here grant. Grant is a very important keyword in SQL about security. Granting access or granting here the selection on, for instance, here you have this data data path YYI security.cell. And we are granting the selection on those columns: product ID, analyst, product, campaigning, quantity, region, state, city, etc., etc. To, and here are specific to whom? Data analyst Miami, which would be a kind of role, right? So we're granting an action. So the data analyst, anybody that pertains to data analyst Miami, I wish to be in Miami actually, are allowed to make a select on those columns. Now, there is something called row level security, and as it says, it's at the row level, which means as soon as you're gonna check out your table with any columns you may have, but then you want to get specific data, and the row level security is a policy applied on each, it's gonna be checked on each row. It's a good example, for instance, to check out this example. For instance, you are a salesperson in a company, and you should have access to your own sales, right? For your own dashboard. So therefore, you know where you are and you know how you are performing. This is for your purpose, right? For your own tasks. So what the data engineer needs to make sure is that I'm gonna provide you access to your own cells that are stored here in this table, but nothing more, nothing less. I don't want you to see how your best friend salesperson next to you is doing for many reasons. Because of the policy of the company. If the organization says, no, I don't want them to see how each other are doing, maybe yes, but if not, then let's make here a row level security. So in this table, And for instance, I'm the salesperson ID number 23, and there are many other IDs right here. But I'm gonna make sure that me, as a salesperson, when I query this table, I can only have the rows with ID equal to 23. So if this row here equal ID equal 24, I don't have this row, I cannot access that row, etc., etc. So that's what is a row level security. Here I'm creating a function with a SQL code. That's the name of the function. Okay. Here is a parameter as sysname. And what we do in this function is to return table with what kind of schema. And the schema would be select one as FN security predicate result, where the analyst is equal to the username that you logged in, or if the username is CEO, then that's okay. Okay. And again, what I mentioned here, ID equal 23, that's what I mentioned. This is it. And this is actually in a dynamic manner. Here is a static manner, and this is a dynamic because it takes the username logged, and it can be whatever person logged in. So so you to know, static here, dynamic here anyway. So well, that's an example, for instance, how to get a procedure in SQL to get the row level security here implemented. Yeah, and I've actually missed here. Create security policy sales filter. We add filter here. We predicate this. Actually, we coming back to this function here, analyst on this database with state equal on. And finally, we grant select on this database to CEO, data analyst Miami, data analyst San Diego. Oh, San Diego, I've never been on this side of uh, United States in West Coast. Yeah, so here that's what is done about managing sensitive data using the row level security, column level security here. And if you want to implement compliance controls for sensitive data, dynamic data masking, for instance, it's always a good thing to apply mask rules uh, when you don't want the data being seen, right? So, for instance, here schema LT, table address, common address, and you can add a mask. What kind of column can I see? What kind of table can I see or schema? Okay, so it prevents unauthorized access to sensitive data by enabling customers to designate how much of the sensitive data to reveal with minimal impact on the application layer. So it's definitely a policy-based security, right? Now, a couple of questions, people. First one, which TCP ports should be configured on your network and computer to allow Azure Synapse Studio to work? I haven't been reviewing this point, so if you don't know the answer, that's perfectly understandable. But however, here's a good insight actually for you guys. If you are planning to work on computer and having this Synapse Studio to work, make sure that the TCP port 80, 443, and 1443 are configured, right, to allow access. Second question, which Azure Key Vault object stores storage account key information? And the answer is secrets. Secrets are one that you can actually there store any storage account key information. Oh, sorry. But Encrypted communication is turned on automatically when connecting to Azure Synapse Analytics. Is it true or false? Encrypted communication is turned on automatically. And remember what I said? Microsoft always encrypt information. So the answer is true. And that's it for this module. We have still a half hour, and that's where actually I would like to review with you the next module. For the lab, you will have a couple of objectives there, securing Azure Synapse Analytics and the data on your workspace, and any managed services, all right? So lab question will be skipped in this part. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna put you in the next module. So just give me a sec. All right, so let's go into the next module. Just a sec. Here we go. Support hybrid transactional analytical processing. We have talked about already data lake. Remember when you have in your data lake, what is a data lake? Is done for having a flow of streaming data and batch data. Sorry. So streaming like in a continuous flow, and the batch when you want to process the data in not continued manner. So now and then you process batch of data, and you want to have two kind of here, let's say, yeah, streaming flow. And here, in the same analogy, we have supporting the transactional and analytical. And transactional is, again, something that is used on the day-to-day or business as usual basis in registering any transaction of your business. And analytical is where you, as data analyst or data engineer, wants to get insight of your data. And we want to support both here, which is possible, HTAP, and within Azure Synapse, and it's gonna be the Synapse link. Okay. Um, the agenda is therefore the following: design hybrid transactional analytical processing in Synapse Analytics, configure Synapse link with Azure Cosmos DB. Azure Cosmos DB is a global database handling NoSQL database, which means unstructured and semi-structured data. Query Azure Cosmos DB. So querying this database. So Apache Spark, Azure Synapse Analytics will get those data from Cosmos DB, and also with a serverless pool of Synapse Analytics. How does it work with let's say here, the Spark pool and the serverless pool to get data from Azure Cosmos. And Azure Cosmos is something that can be considered as a transactional database. So first part, how to design this hybrid transactional and analytical processing in analytics, in Synapse Analytics. All right, so here we have a schema, right, where you can see first operational data getting into the Azure Cosmos DB. And then you're gonna have your Azure Synapse link, making the link between this database and your Synapse Analytics. The link would be a cloud native HTAP. Here you have your transactional store. Here you have your analytical store because as it is here drawn, column store is something that you want to have in an analytical store, right? Because it's optimized for analytical queries, whereas the transactional store is more like here, it's drawn row, row lines, etc. So it's better and it's more optimized for transactional reads and writes. Okay. Um, Cosmos DB actually is a cloud native hybrid transactional and analytical processing. So that's one thing about Azure Cosmos DB. It's hybrid. I mentioned Cosmos DB can be seen as a transactional, but it's also an analytical database. It has those capability that enables you to run near real-time analytics over operational data. And Azure Synapse Link creates tight, seamless integration between Azure Cosmos and Azure Synapse. That's what it does here, Synapse Link. So the architecture shown in this slide, well, shows well how to design a hybrid transactional and analytical process using Azure Synapse Analytics. On the left side, on the left-hand side, it shows the operational data that comes in at the transactional store in the container, which is here Cosmos DB, and an auto sync takes place to move the operational data to the analytical store. Okay, that's the auto sync here. But we are still in Cosmos DB, right? So um, through cloud native HTAP with Azure Synapse Link, the data can be stored in Azure Synapse Analytics, where you can use the data for machine learning and, for instance, the big data analytics, right? And an API dashboard, as for instance I mentioned, Power BI is a very good tool to visualize those data. So that's what's happening here, okay? And Synapse Link again brings together Cosmos DB Analytical Store with Azure Synapse Analytics runtime support. This integration enables you to build cloud native HTAP. So HTAP means hybrid, hybrid transactional analytical processing. Okay, you have the OLAP, uh, yeah, OLAP, OLTP, and here HTAP. Let me maybe write it down that for you. We as a data engineer or data analyst are in the OLAP context, right? And it's online analytical processing. The OLTP, online transactional processing. And finally, we have the third one here. We want the both of the word. We want to manage the transactional and the analytical. So the solution is HTAP, which is hybrid transactional analytical processing. Okay. We want the both. We want both, and that's here the solution. Like this. And I would not repeat myself as I mentioned, right? Transactional versus analytical. Again, transactional is more about getting the data of any business actions, whereas analytical, we want to get insight. So this allows us to make both of those contexts. When you use Azure Cosmos DB Analytical Store, you have to be always, you have to keep in mind that it's fully isolated column store, okay? And Azure Synapse Link here enables
no ETL analytics in Azure Synapse Analytics against what happened here in operational data at the proper scale, right? So business analysts, data engineers, data scientists, they can now use Synapse Spark or the Synapse SQL however we want to run near real-time business intelligence. And that's the beauty of it. And machine learning pipelines, etc. You can achieve this without impacting actually the performance of your transactional workloads here on Azure Cosmos DB. So that's the beauty of it. Remember, always keep separated the analytical from the transactional because the performance will be affected. But however, we want to keep the both in control in Azure Cosmos DB as it performs both context, transactional and analytical. Then we want to have maybe this cloud native hybrid solution. So we get those data here processed for analytical purpose. Um, and let's pretend, okay, we should have different roles within your organization. This could be a good starting point for some use cases if you want to implement the roles to develop HTAP architecture with the Synapse Analytics. You get the Synapse link connected to Azure Cosmos DB, and for instance, a data engineer who wants to make data accessible for consumer and creating SQL, Spark tables, and it's going to create them on Azure Cosmos DB containers without any manual ETL process. So it's going to be automated. On the other hand, a BI, a business intelligence engineer, wants to model and publish a report to access the operational data, right, in Cosmos DB directly through, for instance, this Synapse SQL and therefore the Synapse link here. Another use case would be a data analyst who wants to derive insights from the operational data in an Azure Cosmos DB here container and querying with Synapse SQL and read the data, scale it, combine with other findings, any other data sources, etc. And another use case for a role would be a data scientist who wants to use Synapse Spark here to find, for instance, a feature to improve the model, train a model, but without doing complex data engineering, right? He's not interested in, he's not into it. So what they can do is also write the results of the model into an Azure Cosmos DB for real-time scoring, and it's going to be done through Spark Synapse again. Here, Synapse, sorry, Spark Synapse. Okay, so that's it for the roles you could have maybe here on this hybrid transactional, let's say HTAP cloud native architecture. Um, well, I guess here to analyze large operational data sets and minimizing the impact of the performance would be one use case also, right? And the operational data in Azure Cosmos DB actually is gonna be extracted and processed by an ETL pipelines, right? And the ETL pipelines, well, requires many layers and movement. So it's sometimes a bit complex. And since it's complex, it can impact the performance and therefore the transactional workloads. So that's why here the purpose is to reduce the complexity with a no ETL job. Because here we're not going to use this ETL process. It's not an ETL job. And Synapse Link allows you to directly access Cosmos DB analytical store. So that's why accessing this analytical store is not an ETL job, right? So that's one thing also to keep in mind. Um, The near real-time insights is also something very important to consider because you can now get rich insights in your operational data in near real time using this Synapse link. And then the ETL-based systems, they tend to have actually higher latency for analyzing the operational data because, well, there's many layers that are needed to extract, transform, and load operational data. So when you use the native integration of Cosmos DB here into the analytical store from the transactional one, well, with Azure Synapse Analytics, you can actually analyze the operational data in near real time, and therefore you're gonna have even new, let's say, business cases or business scenarios. So this is very, very powerful thing. No impact on operational workloads, as mentioned. So that's something very important and a great benefit of using Synapse Link. The scaling again, you can scale it on a large scale workload, no problem. The cost also, it's cost effective because with Azure Synapse Link, you can get a cost optimized, fully managed solution for your operational analytics. It eliminates actually the extra layers of storage, compute required in the traditional ETL pipelines, right? And Azure Cosmos DB Analytical Store here follows a consumption-based pricing model. Consumption-based pricing model. This is something you could get in onto your Azure documentation. So getting more familiar with what are the consumption-based pricing model. Basically, it's like when you pay for what you use, right? Simply said. For instance, the read, write operation queries executed, you're gonna pay for what you're actually doing, what you are reading, what you're writing, what you are querying, no more, no less. So it doesn't actually require you to provision any throughput as you do today, for instance, for the transactional workloads and accessing the data with highly elastic compute engines from Synapse Analytics makes actually the overall cost, very efficient in running storage and compute. Okay. Analytics for locally available, globally distributed multi-master data is another benefit here. And you can run analytical queries effectively against the nearest regional copy of the data in Azure Cosmos DB because Cosmos DB, as I mentioned, is a globally expanded or globally present. It's global. So depending on where you are, it's going to be on the nearest region where you are, copy. And Azure Cosmos DB provides the state-of-the-art capability to run the globally distributed analytical workloads, yeah, along with the transactional. So yeah, it's a bit like we are putting here lots of let's say how you say um, lots of good positive comments about Cosmos DB. But yeah, Cosmos DB is a very powerful database, a global database for transactional and operational and analytical queries. All right, configure Azure Synapse Link with Azure Cosmos DB. So here you have, for instance, a screenshot about how you go to configure Synapse Link with Azure Cosmos DB. In the new container, here you're gonna put, for instance, the analytical store to off if you don't want it to get into this Cosmos DB, the analytical store, but you can put on actually here, right? So it's important to provision, right, the Cosmos account, Synapse Analytics workspace in one of the supported regions because not all regions are going to support Cosmos DB. So that's one thing also to consider. And that Synapse links is also available in the Azure region you're using. For instance, as per today, you have US West Central US East, West US to North Europe, West Europe, South Central US, Southeast Asia, Australia East, East to UK South. So we have a couple of regions where it is available. So you just have to check that. This information is available definitely on the website. And then you can configure then your Synapse link with Azure Cosmos DB. And when you deploy the account in one of those regions, then it should be enabled to use Synapse link. You select a new container, you enter a name for your database, the container, uh, your basically your partition key, you turn on the analytical store if you want it, definitely. After you enable the analytical store, it's going to create actually a container with analytical TTL property. Okay, just so you know what's going on. And yeah, if you have previously not enabled Synapse link on your account, it will prompt you to do so because it's a prerequisite to create an analytical store container here. So yeah, to connect the Cosmos DB into your Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, you should actually navigate later on in the Synapse Studio environment to go to the Data tab, and connect to external data. And then you're gonna choose your Cosmos DB account. Okay. Third lesson, query Azure Cosmos DB with Apache Spark for Azure Synapse Analytics. So a couple of steps here. First one, we're gonna load data in Spark and create a base for data frame, and we're gonna flatten the JSON data. Remember, a JSON data document is something that is nesting attributes, and therefore it's a complex data structure, but we always want to flatten those data. Finally, we're going to create a final data frame with flattening those data and when it is loading the Spark, right? So here we go. Like it's explained here, we have Cosmos DB. We're creating a data frame. 3 notebook cells needed, for instance. And it goes there with Spark. Spark is going to process it with a cluster and getting the data into the SQL one. And you do that with notebook. Yeah, so read the Cosmos DB container, aggregate the results into the data frame, and ingest that data into SQL pool. Sorry. So next slide here, query Azure Cosmos DB with Apache Spark for Azure Synapse. So it's the next, the continuation, the following. Our first step, we're gonna load data to data frame from Cosmos DB Analytical Store into a data frame, right? So we are coming from the Analytical Store in Cosmos DB. And once your data is loaded into a data frame, you're gonna be you're gonna be able to perform additional analysis here. And so you make sure here that actually this operation doesn't impact the transactional store. Okay. So here is actually the implementation of what I've just explained. Good thing always is also to read the comments. Okay, you put the comments with this. I would say I wouldn't say hashtag. There's another name for that. I forget already. But anyway, hashtag, yeah. Read from Cosmos DB Analytical Store into a Spark data frame and displays 10 rows from the data frame. That's what we're going to do here. Select a preferred list of regions in a multi-region Cosmos DB account. Add, and here is the dot option for this method, Spark Cosmos preferred region, for instance. So here is the data frame we are creating with the method of the Spark object reading method.
and the backslash is for getting onto lines. Okay, we're gonna actually chain those four methods here: format, option, and load. Twice option. Format cosmos.olap for online analytical processing. Uh, Here, the Spark Synapse linked service. We need this linked service. Here the name of the database of Cosmos, and again here the container, the user profile HTTP, and finally loading in to display the link, right? Step two, create a database data frame. Okay, so we're gonna create a data frame pointing to the container you selected. Again, what it looks like when you want to implement that, you go there, here, table, and you have those data here, right? Product reviews, and here you have actually the structure of the data frame. Finally, or step three, and I guess we're gonna have another one, we want to use the preferred products column array when we want to flatten this JSON file. So we want to use, and yeah, we want to use the preferred product summary and product reviews for each user and create a graph of products that are from their preferred list that match actually the products that I have reviewed. So yeah, we need to create two new data frames. And remember what we were saying with the data architecture, data lake, when we've bronze, silver, and gold tables. So that's the same process here. We need our data frames to flatten the files, the data, sorry. So it's gonna contain the flattened values, sorry, from both two columns, so we can join them in a later step. And finally, creating the final data frame. The final step is actually to join the preferred product flats and product reviews data frame. So we're gonna join, and therefore the user ID and product ID values are going to be together in our graph. And to do that, you have to enter the following in the new cell and run it: preferred product reviews, parentheses, preferred product flat dot join. And don't worry, guys, if you don't get those code straight away in your labs, you're gonna see that again, and later on in your exam, it's not like a requirement to know all those code, right? But it's always good to have seen it once at least, and then you get familiarized with it little by little. Finally, we're almost done with this module, and we're gonna query Azure Cosmos DB with SQL serverless. So here is again an example. The query starts out by creating a new serverless SQL pool database named profiles. Okay. If it does not exist, then it execute here this use profile. Yeah, here go. Okay, so it drops the user profile HTTP if it exists. And finally, it performs the following: it creates user profile HTTP. It uses the open role set statement. Okay, here, and we're gonna here set the data source type to Cosmos DB. We're going to set the account details and specify that we want to create the view of the Azure Cosmos DB. And the with here, close matches actually the property names in the JSON documents. Okay, so you have to know your structure in your JSON document. User ID, card ID, preferred products as a varchar, product reviews, etc. Right? And since the product reviews properties in the JSON document contains nested subarrays, we want to join. Okay, we want to join the properties from the document with all elements. So Synapse SQL enables us actually to flatten the nested structure. Okay, and finally, to output shows the statement successfully executed here. here we go. Query executed successfully. Um, yeah, I think that's something you should just have in mind. And here are some review questions. Um, First one, sorry, where do you enable Azure Synapse link for Azure Cosmos DB? So remember when we are setting the Synapse link to connect the Cosmos DB to the Synapse pool, where should you actually go? Whether it is in, let's say, Synapse or a Cosmos DB, where do you think you should go to enable that? You can answer that by chat, definitely. And I'm going to give you the answer in just a moment. And the answer is you have to go in the Azure Cosmos DB. Okay, that's where you need to go to enable Azure Synapse Link. And then you can connect those two components. Second question, how can you manage the life cycle of data and define how long it would be retained for in an analytical store? So how can you manage the life cycle of data and define how long it will be retained for in an analytical store? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about, and I'm gonna give you the answer. And here an answer. It says Synapse linked service. Daniela. I guess that was maybe for the previous question, or is it for now? And the answer is configure the default time to leave. So TTL means time to leave. Okay, so you're gonna have to configure that, and therefore you will be able to say, okay, I want it to leave, I don't know, uh, 2 hours, 30 minutes, 1 day, 1 week, etc. So property for record store, right? And finally, the third question is, what is the name of the application architecture that enables near real-time querying to provide insights? What is the name of the application architecture that enables near real-time querying to provide insights? Real-time querying. Well, we not. You need to have these hybrid thing. Remember what we talked about, the real thing. What we want to have the best of the two worlds of the transactional and analytical context. So what is this architecture we talked about at the beginning? Let's see if I have some answers here. And yes, I get some answers here. Rudolph says HTAP. Alfonso says HTAP. And Ramesh said also HTTP previously. Okay. Good. I have some answers here. Husseini Dulika say HTTP. And indeed, you guys were right. HTAP is the proper answer. Perfect. Hybrid. Hybrid is the thing now. We want the best of everything. All right. That's what we tend to do, actually. I mean, whether it is in business, remember, I was working as a business analyst in previous years, and there are like a couple of business strategies taking place, and then some of them were like, okay, you have a business strategy about the cost leadership when you want to be the cheapest on the market, and you have another one which is the differentiation strategy when you want to be differentiated and therefore having a unique product, but not definitely not cheap, right? So which way you want to go, this or this? And there is actually also this hybrid approach when you want to have the cost leadership and differentiated product strategy, both in one. And but to implement that strategy is very difficult because you need to manage many variables. And should I say here is the same thing. You need to be careful about the transactional database and the analytical database or the analytical context. But Cosmos DB and with this architecture, should I say, Microsoft made a bit easier our life. The same thing when talking again about integration. Integration, many things are very well integrated, right? When you use data lake with synapse, etc., etc. Okay, so we're done, people. You will have your labs in a couple of moments. So do not hesitate to perform. And also, one advice when you do your lab, you see instructions. Try to get a high level first about the task, the exercises that are required from you. Try to think again about the why. Why are they making this? Why should I do that? For what? What is behind all those instructions? Because believe me, I was also like doing those labs and clicking, doing that. But if you don't take time to understand what is going behind that, no purpose. So think about what you're doing there, why, maybe try to elaborate those ideas there, and that's where you're gonna get the best out of the labs, right? So to sum up, HTTP hybrid, SQL serverless, Azure Synapse Link makes possible to link your Synapse with Azure Cosmos DB, which is a very powerful database. We're gonna flatten JSON files because we want to make things simpler, easier. That's the idea of there. Thank you very much, people, for having this time with me. I wish you the best of luck on those labs you're gonna do now, on the process of digesting the information. Do not hesitate to try to look for help, any other materials, etc. So again, thank you very much. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you again. Max signing off. Thank you very much.